start recording right now, and we'll get underway with our webinar this morning. I just want to thank everybody for being here with me. There's a number of you who are a part of the discussion today. Please feel free to interrupt me at any time during the webinar and ask questions. You can also, I don't know if you figured out how to write a question to me, but it's really easy for you to just write a question to me on your computer, and I can answer that way as well. So right now I'm going to mute everyone. Well, no, I'm going to keep you all unmuted just in case you have any questions for me. So today we're going to talk about the value spreadsheet. I'm going to actually run through a scenario of just how it all works. Many of you have probably been through this with me before. For those of you who have not, this is going to be a really good exercise. All right, here we go. So if you look really closely at this sheet, you can kind of see how it's been divided up into two different sections. You have conventional hay and you have dew point hay with kind of a bottom line increase right here in the bottom right hand corner. So I have pre-populated this value spreadsheet for a 500-acre farm that's making approximately 6.5 tons of annual production, and they're selling their hay for about $120 a ton. And then we've got some factors here. We'll talk about, these are the value factors for the spreadsheet that we feel like the dew point machine is capable of increasing on a farm operation. So the bottom line increase here is 12%, and I'm going to show you how we go through kind of coming up with that number and what each and every one of these numbers looks like and where it's coming from on the screen. This way you'll have a lot better opportunity to kind of help present it to your customers as you bring them in to either do an assessment with them about their farm operation. For people who have just, I kind of perfected this spreadsheet from people just calling Staley West, asking how, what is the value of this machine? Why would I want to spend a bunch of money to buy it? And so we kind of created this spreadsheet to help show people the value of what the machine is capable of producing on a farm operation. Over here in the right-hand corner, I've got just a typical 3x4 average bale weight. For the sake of this webinar, we'll stick to 3x4 size bales. I know a number of you probably work with 4x4. A lot of your customers have 4x4 bales, or maybe even 3x3 bales. But for this particular kind of go through on this, we're going to stick to 3x4. And then anything that is blue on this value spreadsheet is basically where you can enter information that changes the calculations. So if it's grayed out or white, you cannot change those. In fact, they're actually the calculations of our input on the blue section. So right here in the upper right hand corner of the screen, you've got 1,250 pounds for the average bale weight. If we could increase that bale weight by 5%, then it's 63 pounds or 1,313 pounds. So I just like to keep that as a handy reference so that when we're talking numbers with people, I don't have to get my calculator out and say, well, how much is a 10% increase on your average bale weight? If they say it's 1,300, that's easy because then we've got these numbers calculated for us. So typical average bale weight, and that's usually how I start the conversation with somebody. I just say, what is your average bale weight, and would you like to see it increase just on bale weight alone? So everybody would love to see the average bale weight increase, unless you're already hitting the numbers that you'd like to see. And in most cases, not everyone is getting the average bale weights that they would like. So I'm going to just start right here. I'm going to go on first crop. You can see my pointer. I've got 500 acres on this farm, and on first cutting we typically harvest approximately 2 tons to the acre. That gives me 1,000 tons. If I can sell it for $120 a ton, then my per acre price is, I'm making about $240 an acre, or $120,000 for the total crop. Now, if we go through the 4 cuttings, and we've got second, third, and fourth cutting. Second cutting's 2 tons, 1.5 tons on third, and just a 1 ton on the last cutting. We'll come up with a gross of about $390,000 for this 500 acre farm for its annual gross income. If you follow down to the bottom here where the 500 is, this is our operating expenses per acre. This is water, fertilizer, the cost to actually run the equipment, and so forth. And some farmers like to change this number because they actually know what it is. If they don't know what it is, we've typically calculated that about $500 to $600 per acre is normal operating expenses. And keep in mind that whatever you do to this side of this equation, you have to do over here, because if I put this at 600, then our increase gets really crazy, because on this side it's costing us 6, on this side it's only costing us 5. So with whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other. So we'll leave them at 500. So at $500 per acre, our total operating expense is $250,000. And we subtract that off of our gross at $390, and we're left with about $130,000 of net income. That's under the conventional hay method. That's not using steam, and that's, this is a fairly optimistic outlook on what the total production would be and the dollars that we would actually collect on that hay that we actually bale. So why have a steamer? Why the dew point? What is it increasing? Because your farmers and customers who buy this machine are going to spend a fairly dear amount of money to get it. And you can see that right here in the cost to upgrade equipment. This is just an average cost that I've come up with and calculated, $215,000. I'll show you what that consists of on my next page right here, where it says equipment needed. If we go to this tab, you can see, let me make this a little bigger so it's easier to see. There we go. Right here, a dew point 6210 2017 model comes standard with the large radial tires and 4-camera system. It also now comes with the Gazika extension cable pre-installed for the price of $187,000. And then hardware is $6,000, so I've just added the two together. So steamer plus hardware is $193,000. Most farms will need some sort of water treatment equipment, so I've got $6,000 in here for a water softener. Obviously, if they were having to use reverse osmosis equipment, it would be more than that, but this is just typical average, so I've got $6,000 in there for the softener. I don't have anything else for these other items because most farms typically have this kind of equipment on hand already, but if they had to, you could add the dollars to it. The water analysis test is $185. That's part of kind of taking care of the water treatment. Not everybody has to buy a Gazika. Most people will buy a Gazika. This is just an approximate cost of the actual sensor to mount to the baler. So I've added that in there as well. If we took that off, then obviously this number is going to drop. A drum of do good, about $2,500. Freight, on average, it's $2,500. Some it's more, some it's less. And then pre-delivery, I've got just the pre-delivery setup and installation and kind of first time in the field. For each dealer, this is going to be different because this is something that you guys decide that you're going to charge or what you need to get the job done and get them fully functional in the field. I've got an average cost of just under $3,000 added into there, or a total equipment cost for somebody to purchase a brand new steamer and get it operational of about $215,000. So I carry this number into this value spreadsheet right here, $215,000. I spread the cost of that machine over basically 5 years. Let's just say it's a 5-year straight line amortization. So 215 divided by 5. The machine costs me approximately $43,000 a year to purchase. That is not including interest, but that also assumes zero salvage value at the end of 5 years. So I feel like I'm being conservative on the cost here. The cost is probably a little less than that, even if you factor in the cost of the financing for the interest on the money that the farmer is going to borrow to buy the machine. This is just a per ton amortization, so based on the total number of tons that the farmer is producing annually, this gives us about an amortization of per ton. So to buy the machine, it's costing them about $12 a ton. This number is tried and true and very tested now by almost 300 machines operating in the field. It is still right around $2 a ton to operate the steamer. That is the cost of the diesel, which is the majority of this $2, cost of fuel, and the cost of the water additives that we're adding to the water, the do-good. You're approximately $2 a ton to operate that. If you wanted to take a historical look at that and say, what did they spend on parts and repairs for the steamer and spread that out over the cost of a summer, that might increase a little bit, maybe $1 or $2, but $2 a ton is pretty safe for the operational cost. So with the 12 to buy it and the 2 to operate it, that works out to about $14 a ton for this 500-acre farm, or about $50,000 of extra expense that they're going to incur annually to purchase and operate the steamer on their farm. And we will deduct that from our gross increases that we see here in yellow. Where are these increases coming from? And that's what we'll cover next. So there's really 4 factors, financial factors, or dollar value added issues that the steamer is capable of helping a farm operation with. So when people ask the question, why do I want to buy a steamer, or how does the steamer pay for itself, or that's a lot of money that you're throwing out there to spend. How in the world am I going to get that back? And here's how. There's really 4 basic ways. I mean, there's other ways, but these are the ones that are what we consider to be the most valuable. So weight. What can we do with the weight? Well, there's a lot of things. I just needed a drink. The steamer is capable of increasing your average bale weight simply because we're holding on to more leaf. We're putting more leaf in the bale. And one of the best ways to maybe emphasize that to a potential customer is to mention the University of Wisconsin leaf loss study that we did almost 20 years ago now, when we preliminarily were looking at the idea of steam on hay. I'm going to pull that up and I'm going to show you real quick what the conclusions of that study were. You can see here it's only a 6-page document. It's not very long. This is the actual published results of the study that the University of Wisconsin did on reducing leaf loss by using steam rehydration. We're going to skip over all of this and just drop down here Oh, by the way, there's one of the original steamers hooked to an old 4900 4x4 baler. Not sure if many people have seen that picture before, but if we just drop here to the conclusions, I'm going to zoom in and highlight the conclusions for you here. Maybe make it just a little bit bigger. I'm going to read this for you because this is really why we are able to increase the bale weight, and it is through leaf retention. There's kind of a myth out there. A lot of customers will say, oh, you're adding water to the hay, of course you're going to make a heavier bale. Well, a steady, reliable natural dew is going to add a little bit of water to the bale as well. So we might as well have a machine that allows us to have full control over how much we put in versus being at the mercy of Mother Nature. And that's a good selling feature for people to understand, that natural dew is very, very good. Everybody knows that baling hay with natural dew works very well, but it's unreliable and it's inconsistent and it is unpredictable. It can come and go or not show up at all. And that's what makes the steamer valuable to people, is that the fact that they can actually control this. So the conclusions on the leaf loss study: baling hay during the day under arid conditions with steam rehydration increased leaf retention and reduced leaf loss compared to the typical practice of baling at night. So when using steam rehydration, bale chamber losses averaged 58% and 43% for large square and 3-tie balers, respectively. Compared to baling with dew rehydration, steam rehydration appeared to soften the plant almost immediately, allowing the baler plunger to flatten the stems, thereby increasing bale density. Compared to baling with dew rehydration, steam rehydration increased bale densities by 20 and 30% for large square and 3-tie bales, respectively. The other thing that's important right here at the bottom, I highlighted it as well, is that steam rehydrated hay had a similar nutritional composition to dew rehydrated hay. I've heard plenty of rumors from people that say steamed on hay doesn't look as good, or it's discolored, or it doesn't have, the nutrient value. These studies were done over the course of actually 2 summers through 2 different growing seasons on a number of different plots, and the studies have shown that the nutritional composition was similar, if not the same, or even better in some instances, and that the increased temperature of the hay caused by the steam application had no impact on heat-damaged protein. In parentheses, you see this ADIP. ADIP is actually defined further up in the article, and it talks a lot about how steam has the potential to impact the protein and feed value, but that it does not affect it, and they did a lot of analysis on that. So the conclusions are in the study, and we rely on that study as one of the most definitive reasons why we're able to increase bale density, and it's because it just does. The steam does do a good job baling hay. So 5%, that's on an average bale, that's about 65 pounds. So if we can pick up an extra 65 pounds, that's worth, quite a bit of money. The second factor here, and typically a lot of people say, well, how many pounds is an average increase? What do people who buy this steamer, what do they typically see? On average, it's somewhere between, a low of 50 and maybe a high of 150 pounds. We have a lot of customers, you probably know many of them, who would tell you that they've seen even gains higher than 100, 150, and maybe even more in the 200-pound range. A lot of it still depends on the operator, their raking practices, how they rake hay, and who the baler operator is. So weight is definitely a value added factor that the dew point machine is capable of doing. Value. This is a big deal in a low hay priced market where prices have slid down as low as they are right now. We need to be able to make supreme quality hay if we're going to stay in business as a hay farmer. And the guys that have supreme hay, they've still sold it for $170, $180 a ton this year. I've talked to a number of hay farmers who use steamers, and even hay farmers who didn't have steamers who were able to produce supreme quality hay. Supreme quality hay, with exception to Idaho, I guess, is still selling for $160 to $180 a ton. Idaho, I've noticed on the Hoyt report, I'm sorry, Idaho. Lane, you can probably hear my voice. Idaho Supreme hay is still right around 100 to 100, maybe 120 on a good day. But elsewhere around the country, Utah, Colorado, Nevada, Arizona, California, supreme quality hay is moving for around 160 average to some highs as much as $170, $180 a ton. So this value factor is a really big deal, and we should emphasize this for our customers as we sit down and show them this spreadsheet, because if my total production is 3,200 tons, and let's say only 1/3 of that is going to be supreme quality hay, that's only like 900 tons, maybe 1,000, just under 1,000 tons. So if only 1/3 of my hay is supreme quality because of the growing conditions or a lack of dew or too much dew that forces us to bale at odd times of the day and we shatter hay, we're giving up a lot of profit when only 1/3 of our total production is going to sell for $160, $180 a ton. So if we can get, say if we could even get 2/3 of our total production, that'd be almost just over 2,000 tons. That'd be it's a little better than half. That would be fantastic if we could get the greater portion of our tonnage to be supreme quality hay. Now I know that the cuttings, second and third cutting, especially second cutting, that's summer hay. It has thicker stems and less leaves, and it's just tough to make supreme quality hay on second and sometimes third cutting. But with a steamer, we are still able to increase our leaf retention, and the leaf retention is where the value is. So even if we have had a difficult time putting up supreme quality hay in those summer cuttings, we definitely can add value to the hay by keeping the leaves. So a 5% value increase is only $6. You can see right here. If I change this to say 10%, this jumps to $132 a ton. And sometimes, if we're dropping from the supreme to just premium category, that's as much as $10 or $20 a ton right now in this hay market. So it would not be unreasonable to say that the steamer is capable of increasing the value of our hay a full kind of hay category, from good hay to premium or premium to supreme. So for this spreadsheet, we're going to just leave it at 10% or 5% for now. So value, that's the second factor. The third factor, and I don't put a lot of dollars in here usually unless a farmer says, that very much so is definitely going to affect our farm operation. We are forced to bale with dry conditions all of the time, or in any one cutting. Say second cutting is an extremely dry cutting for them, or say third cutting is an extremely wet cutting, so they get rained on crop. We can put dollars in here. This 10,000, I'll just delete it so you can see. What it does is it decreases this number right here, this 15,650 that you see as your net increase. It'll drop by $10,000 if I zero that. You can see it drops to just 5,000 here. So we'll put the 10,000 back. The fourth and final factor was actually brought to our attention by one of our customers in New Mexico. He argued the point that because of the dew point machine, they were able to speed up their entire crop cycle by cutting more hay each day and having more hay ready to bale as a result. And because they had that hay ready to bale and they didn't have the bottleneck that usually occurs because they're not able to get as many acres baled as they would like to get baled, with the dew point machine, they extended their baling window. They could bale anywhere from 250 to almost 300 acres a day with a single steamer and a backup baler baling during the dew time when they had dew. So they increased the number of acres of hay that they would actually cut down each day to try and shrink their window. By shrinking that window, we get the water back on sooner, and then probably more importantly, we take advantage of the growth unit days from the sun. So a day in July is like a week in September. And if we can take advantage of those growth unit days during the months of June and July, and even the earlier, the mid days of August, we are adding growth to our crop that we would otherwise not be taking advantage of because we were waiting to cut hay, or we were waiting on the weather because we didn't cut enough hay and get it all done before the weather came. So he argued the fact that he claimed that they got a full ton, that it was a full cutting because of the steamer. That's pretty aggressive because on a 500-acre farm, that's like $63,000. That's, gosh, 63,000 divided by the total 390,000 gross. That's almost 16% of their annual gross income. That's huge. And I don't ever tell anybody that you're going to, if you buy a steamer, you're going to get a full extra cutting every year. That's just, it's possible in some areas, but it's not plausible to just sell that as an idea to everybody. A quarter of a ton, which is about an extra inch to 2 inches of growth on the crop, that's very realistic. And people will tell you all the time that who have steamers, they will tell you, we used to never cut our fourth cutting because it was always too short. But because we sped up our crop cycle, we definitely cut fourth cutting now, because fourth cutting, by the time we get there, is a full cutting, rather than it being, rather than fourth cutting being 0.75, they're taking, they're taking that full ton and adding it to their total tonnage for the year. So a quarter of a ton is a very realistic number. So weight and value, that gives us about $40,000 of increase. The being forced to bale in dry conditions, with a steamer, we're never forced to bale in extra dry conditions, so that might save us about $10,000 on any one of these given crops. And then the quarter of a ton of added yield increase can net us out about $15,000. So if we add this all together, 39 plus 15 is 55,000. We add the 10 to the gross here, and we have to pay for the machine, obviously. We don't get all of this benefit for nothing. So we subtract our $55,000 gross increase from our cost to purchase and operate, $50,000. That leaves us with 5 plus this 10. We've got a net increase because of our investment of $215,000 in a steamer. We've increased our bottom line only about $15,000, or 12% better than we would have been had we not invested in it. Keep in mind, this is a 500-acre farm, just 500 acres at $120 a ton. If this was, let's just say we were able to take, let's take 2 of the 4 cuttings, and let's say we're able to get $160 a ton for our first cutting and $160 a ton for our 4th cutting because we made it all in the supreme category. We just jumped an extra 2% just on those just on that factor alone. And we went from 15,000 to 27,000. What if our bale weight increased, instead of only 5% or 65 pounds, which is very low actually, if we went to what most people will tell you, anywhere from 100 to 150, let's throw in an 8% weight increase. Now we're making money. We've jumped, instead of $15,000, almost like a break-even analysis, we've increased 21% better than what our net income would have been conventionally. Almost a $41,000 increase on top of, that's after we've paid for this equipment, mind you, in the first year that we bought it. So this is important analysis for us to show our customers what they really have when they're looking at a dew point. And even for farmers who say, oh, it's all good, we have enough balers, we have enough people, we don't have to worry about schedules, or we get enough dew. Everybody who tells you they get enough dew, I like to make this joke, because everybody who says they get enough dew is up in the night. Do you get the joke? They're up in the night because they're still chasing the dew. Because even if they do get regular dew, they're up in the nighttime and they're chasing it. And it's not consistent and it's not as reliable as they think it is. In fact, sometimes they get too much dew, which is just as much of a problem as not having any dew at all, because you still can't bale if there's too much dew. And what do you do when, when the dew starts to come off of that hay? Do you just leave it until it's dry and wait for the dew to come back, or do you go out there with a steamer and just bale it up because now it's gotten dry to the point where we can actually bale it? And so this spreadsheet has probably sold more steamers than anything, except for people saying, I believe in this product and it's worked on our farm. And people who have taken us to task on this spreadsheet, meaning that they have taken this spreadsheet, they've gone in and put in their own historical data, always come back and say, this spreadsheet is accurate. I put in all of my historical data, I put in the dollars per ton that I got, and it spits out the numbers exactly like our balance sheet says. And so feel free to share this spreadsheet with your customers. Invite your customers that you have identified as potential steamer owners, and don't just limit yourself to great big farms. This is a 500-acre operation, and they're paying for a $215,000 steamer with depressed hay prices. It's not rocket science. The machine is valuable. It is probably arguably the most valuable investment that a hay farm can make when hay prices are depressed. The only investment that I could probably argue would be more valuable would be water, to be able to deliver water to a crop and have reliable water, because without water you don't have a crop. Otherwise, I don't know what else can make you more money than investing in a dew point machine, especially in a down hay market. I think it's important that we realize how very valuable this spreadsheet is in educating people, because let's just drop this back down to $120 a ton. We'll leave our weight the same, but let's increase the acres, because I'm sure many of you know a farm or two that has at least 1,000 acres or maybe even a 1,500 acre farm. A 1,500 acre farm typically is going to have at least 2 balers. And I would argue they don't need to get rid of the second baler. If they want to trade it and take the dollars and put it towards the steamer, that's fine. But if they can keep the second baler, they'll be even more productive than what this spreadsheet allows us to be, because with that second baler, they'll bale even more acres during the times when they do have a good natural dew, but the steamer will fill in all of the gaps otherwise, and they will become a much more productive farm than they ever imagined they could be when you've got a steamer and a backup baler working during the times when you can make naturally good hay. So they take a 1,500 acre farm operation. We're still at 120 bucks a ton. We're at 8% increase, so we're increasing almost 100 pounds per bale, getting them to an average of 1,400. We've got a 5% increase. We're jumping $6, so we're going to get hypothetically almost $6 more per ton. In this case, we're doing well enough with our increases here because it's a bigger farm that we'll just get rid of this. And a quarter of a ton on a 1,500 acre farm, just a quarter of a ton is worth almost $50,000. What I like to do with this spreadsheet, especially on bigger farms, is lower this all the way down to a worst case scenario break-even analysis. What is it that this machine absolutely must deliver with these kinds of hay prices in order to be an investment that's still paying for itself? So let's drop all the value out of it. So we don't get any more money for our hay. We don't get any more tonnage. That's a big one. You see the drop there? We went from 18% increase, almost $73,000, to $30,000 and only 7% increase. This is a very valuable factor that no other piece of equipment I really feel like can give you added yield increase like a steamer can. You can cut your hay faster, you can rake your hay faster, but typically it is very difficult to bale your hay faster and avoid the bottleneck without the ability to extend your baling window, and only the steamer allows you to extend your baling window. So that's a big value factor. Almost 10% of our total increase is this factor alone. So we've zeroed out the value, we've zeroed out these crop value loss factors, we've zeroed out the added yield increase. Let's just see what is our bottom line weight increase that we have to get out of the machine to make it work. Looks like about just over 5%, because we're losing money at 5%. So let's say first cutting is 6%, fourth cutting is 6%. If we average the two, the average of those four numbers added together is what? %5.5%. We need to get 5.5% weight increase, so about 70 pounds, to break even on our investment. And I can almost, I hate to use the word guarantee, but I can almost guarantee you that if you put a steamer on your farm operation, you will get 5.5% of weight increase across the board, simply because the steamer is that good at doing its job. 5.5%, 70 pounds is not that hard to increase your average bale weight by 65 to 70 pounds. So that is the value spreadsheet. I won't cover it because we're pretty much out of time. I promised I'd try to keep these between 30, 35, and 45 minutes or so. I'm trying to keep them well under an hour, just so that people would stay around and listen. But This is the value spreadsheet, and this spreadsheet is what makes or breaks somebody's determination of whether or not they will buy this machine. And so as a salesman for your dealership that you work for that represents steamers, become familiar with this value spreadsheet. Ask questions about it. Give me feedback on it where I could improve it and make it better, because this really is what helps a farm decide whether or not they need to buy this machine, especially when money is tight for a hay farm right now and there is a propensity to avoid making any new purchases in 2017. For those of you who have custom operations, who do a lot of custom work and do contract baling, there is a spreadsheet for that. It has been modified to help show the actual owner who you're baling hay for, what his bottom line increase is going to be after you charge him your extra fees for baling with steam. And trust me, this thing works, because we have taken this spreadsheet to a farmer who is paying somebody else to bale his hay, showed him what the steamer was capable of doing, and no joke, convinced him that charging him an extra $2 or $3 per ton simply because he was getting his hay baled with steam sold them on the idea that they were going to do that because of the added increases that they were able to make. So if you have any customers who are custom operators who are saying, hey, I love the idea of a steamer, I want a steamer, but I just can't find my way to spend that kind of money and be able to charge more money to my customers to justify the cost of this steamer. This is how we show people how to make custom operations work. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, we're still baling hay for the consumer, the guy that wants to sell it. And we need to show the guy that's selling it that he's getting something more for it. And this is how we do it, is on this other tab, this custom client values versus equipment purchase values. So I'm going to unmute everybody just to offer up any questions that people might have right now. I'll just leave it open for the next 3 to 5 minutes. If nobody has any questions, then we'll just end the webinar. I appreciate all of you being here today, and your attendance is much appreciated. And if you weren't here, hopefully you enjoyed it after the fact on the recording. Please go to the dealer portal under the resources tab, and you can watch it right there. Any questions?